Hello, welcome to this edition of Notes and Accords, where I am going to focus on rose in perfume. As always, we're going to be starting the first hour of the live stream going over all of the raw materials that are used in composing rose in perfume. That will include naturals and synthetics. Then after we've covered that, we'll have a brief intermission and we'll move on to this second hour, which will involve my covering some of my favorite fragrances to feature the note of rose, whether they're rose soliflores or very rose-centric fragrances. So we have, at the moment, 7 people who have jumped onto the live stream. Don't be shy. Hit up the chat and let us know what your scent of the morning, day, evening, afternoon, whatever time of the day is. Let us know what scent you're wearing. And this is a perfect opportunity to make some suggestions for the discussion. Or if you have any questions. I won't answer the questions immediately as they come, but I will make sure that they are starred so that I can return to them as the conversation progresses. So what I want to do is I want to first discuss roses themselves. I'm not going to get too much into necessarily a history lesson on why the fragrant rose has come into perfumery. All of that is at your fingertips online. There is a rich history of the way that rose has been used in ritual and in ceremony and in incense and throughout all different cultures and various means. And has long been a part of perfume, centuries of a history involving the usage of rose in perfume. So what I mostly want to do is talk about the roses that are used in perfume making. So that involves different types of roses that are distilled into perfume materials. So we're going to get started with that soon. I'm going to allow a few more people to start filing in. We have 10 people at the moment. We're going to take a look at the comments here. We have Philippe. Lovely to see you. Scent of the day is Samsara Eau de Toilette. We have Catch My Whiff. Good evening to you as well. Great to see you here. And just a reminder to folks that I do have a Buy Me a Coffee option. I have been grateful to have many people support me in this channel, which enables me to pay my fees for running this channel, for running my StreamYard, and for developing a more robust platform. So buy me a coffee. Each one is $5. Your support does help grow this channel. The link is in the pinned comment in the comments section. If you do buy 6 coffees, you are eligible to receive a sample pack if you are in the US or Canada. Sorry, I cannot ship outside of out of North America at this time, or outside of Canada and US. So just wanted to remind folks of that. For those of you who are loyal viewers and loyal supporters, that your contributions are really appreciated. 12 people tuned in. I think I'll get started very shortly. So what I'm going to do first is just talk about roses in general and give sort of a layman's breakdown on roses in general and steer into the roses that can yield an essential oil. Okay, so we're most familiar with the classic romantic archetypal red rose, and some varieties of red rose do have a very deep, winey, Not winey as in wah, winey as in wine-like kind of aroma. But most of the red roses that you may find are not able to yield enough of an essential oil to be used in perfumery. And still many more actually don't have a fragrance, because many of the cultivated roses that are used for just giving to your loved one on Valentine's Day, something that you buy at the supermarket, or even those that are bred for their beauty, have had much of their fragrance bred out of it. So for many people who ask, why don't most roses smell? All roses had a rather fragrant smell until various cultivars had been bred out of their beautiful fragrance. But there are some, like the tea rose, the classic tea rose. We're going to actually be talking about Perfumer's Workshop tea rose very shortly. These are examples of beautiful ornamental roses that have breathtaking, spectacular scents. But even still, these roses don't yield enough perfume material that can be used in perfumery. But they have gorgeous scents that can be reconstructed in perfume using the naturals that we're going to be discussing and the great palette of synthesized aromacams. These are among some of my favorite roses visually and also olfactorily. Hi, Pat. Hi, Emily. Lovely. Great choice. And then, hi there, my friend. Welcome back. Hi, Capo6. Here we are. Now, this is Rosa Damascena, the Damascus rose, the Bulgarian rose. This is the rose that is bred for its aroma. And it is a pleasant-looking rose, but it isn't best known for how it looks visually. It is best known for how beautiful it smells and for the relatively high yield of essential oil and scented material. So we're going to talk a little bit about something called Rose Otto. That is the essential oil of the rose, which is far more expensive. And I do have some in my possession, but I would use very little of it because it is very expensive. Mostly what I would use in some of my blending are the solvent extracted absolutes that would come from this flower. And we'll talk a little bit about all the different terroir that we can consider for Bulgarian rose scent profiles, because some of Rosa Damascena isn't necessarily grown in Bulgaria. It could be grown in Egypt, or it could be grown in Morocco. Here, this is the Taif rose, or the cabbage rose. This is also known as a rose de Maille. This is a beautiful scent profile, and it is sort of the more attractive cousin of the Bulgarian rose, the Rosa Damascena. This is Rosa centrifolia. So we'll be talking about that one a little bit. Note how these are all pink. Most of the heavily scented roses that are used in perfume making happen to be pink or occasionally white. So that is the Taif rose, the cabbage rose, or the Rose de Maille. And Catch My Whiff says that he is wearing an iris scent today in tribute of the Iris Week that I have on Instagram. Very lovely. And Hi Capo6 says just sprayed on Oud Palau in honor of the rose theme. Excellent. And rose is actually what broke the seal for me to start wearing florals. And then lastly here we have Rosa rugosa. This may be familiar to many of you, especially here in the States. Rosa rugosa, or the Chinese rose, we often call locally the beach rose. This is the one that has a certain penchant for sandier soil, often grows by the ocean or by beaches. And there's even an essential oil and a solvent extracted absolute for this wonderfully scented flower, which is somewhere in between the scent of a tea rose and that of a Bulgarian rose. So lovely stuff. These come in all different shades, from this deep magenta to a light pink to a white, and often it has this sort of layout of its petals, which makes it recognizable, and those very distinct leaves as well. Yes, it's true. So the both the Bulgarian rose and the Rose de Mai do look kind of similar to peonies, and we're going to touch a little bit on peonies very briefly because there is some overlap between the materials used for a peony accord and with rose. So there you go. We're back to our lovely red rose there, and we're going to end the slide. So we'll get started with talking about the natural materials, which I'll bring over here. 11 people tuned in at the moment. Hopefully we'll have more filing in. It's filing in. Oh, whoopsie daisy. Many of these have been purchased at such retailers as the wonderful Eden Botanicals and also Perfumer Supply House, Howdy Caboose Juice, okay, let's get this thing going. We're going to chat about first the Bulgarian rose, Rosa Damascena. If only I could really show you the color. I could have been more prepared to do that. And it's actually a very deep reddish color, like a wine color, but when it is diluted, it turns a little bit more of an orange to amber color. And it displays a rich, warm, radiant, slightly spicy, deep floral odor with green, honey-like undertones. It has very good diffusive power, and the full beauty of Rosa Damascena essence can be enjoyed by creating a combination of 15 to 20% of Roma Damascena Otto, which is the essential oil, with the Rosa Damascena Absolute. Now, Rose Otto, as I said, it is the essential oil. Very little needs to be used to make an impact on a composition. It's extremely complex. It's sweet, full-bodied, and just a remarkable smell to it. But also keep in mind, folks, and I've mentioned this before on previous streams, that one is not to expect these natural materials to smell exactly like the flower would. These are distillations. So when you think of something being distilled, it's being compounded, it's being broken down, it's being reduced to certain elements that can take the distillation process. And with that process, there are going to be certain aspects of the rose that are lost. And that is why what we do is we reconstruct a flower, we reconstruct the rose. And in conventional perfumery, there is the combination of small percentages of the natural material along with a selection of different types of synthetics or other naturals coming from other plants, other botanicals, to create the full picture, the full realism of the rose. That being said, sometimes the perfumer wants to do surrealism, which is just as fascinating. And I'm going to take a look at the chat here. We have 15 people who are at the moment. Thank you, Catch My Whiff. We have 15 people tuned in, and as of his comment, there were only 4 likes. If people can please hit the thumbs up button, and let's bring up those likes. Thank you. And can I show you the rosiest fragrance? How, pray tell, will you show me? You could share it with us. But this is a one-man show this time around. You can share with us what you think is the rosiest fragrance. Hi there. Good day from Melbourne. and Scent of the Day Jaguar Aromatic Fougere by Dominique Poisas. So we talked about the Bulgarian rose, Rosa damascena, but Rosa damascena, like I said, doesn't necessarily grow in Bulgaria, doesn't necessarily grow just in grass. The terroir can also make an impact on the scent profile. So there's some others that I'm familiar with, like Egyptian rose, which tends to be deeper, warmer, earthier, bold, tenacious, and also Moroccan rose, which is a bit sweeter than the Bulgarian variety of Rosa damascena. And it is a deeper middle note kind of rose, warm, sweet, with soft, spicy undertones, and it has excellent tenacity to it as well. The next one we'll talk about is, let's see if we have this little one here. This is Rosa centrifolia, Rose de Mai. I can see if I can, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to zoom in, but I hope you can trust that. That is what I have. This is courtesy of Eden Botanicals. Now, the Rose de Mai is a somewhat different scent profile from Rosa damascena. And one of the most notable differences with it is that it has this softness, this sweetness, a delicate kind of quality to it. It's much more of a honey-like kind of quality. It has a certain radiance that differs from the absolute of Rosa damascena or the Rosato. And there are a number of fragrances that will prominently feature it. Either it will be referred to as the Taif rose, Taif, or the May rose. So that's another one. And then I have the Chinese rose here, Rosa rugosa. And as I was discussing earlier during the slideshow, this is known here in the States as the beach rose because of its inclination towards growing in sandier soils. It's in abundance here in the summertime along the coasts of New England, and the smell is just spectacular. And then I have a few natural bases that are at the perfumer's disposal. As far as I know, these are still in production. This one is produced by Firmenich. This is a Rose de Mai signature. And a Rose de Mai signature, as opposed to just using the straight up Rose Absolute. It has some of that rose centrifolia in it, and it's blended with some other materials, natural and synthetic, to really bring it to life. And then we have Rose Petals Natural. This is an all-natural blend from Robertet. And this is an all-natural extraction. And what an incredible extraction. It brings out like really a lot more of the top qualities. We detect a little bit of more of the, we'll get into this more, but the oxides, which are more the metallic kind of trebly part of the rose, and the honey-like phenyl ethyl alcohol. It's just very much a rounded, full representation of rose in a natural extract. And I figure since I veered into some natural bases, we'll get into some other bases that are used. Now, just a reminder to folks, and I've talked about this before, bases are produced by perfume material providers and suppliers and producers as a way of constructing a good rose accord or rose note into a fragrance without having to put together everything, from scratch. So these are very commonly used in perfume. Some independent perfumers argue that it is problematic because of the consistency of these bases and the risk for these bases being discontinued. But a number of these rose bases in particular have been in production forever, and there really is no sign of them ceasing production, short of some drastic changes in regulations. One example of that would be Rose Jivko 217, which is produced by Givaudan. And this is a combination of naturals and synthetics to create the three-dimensional rose. And just to refer to my notes on Rose Jivko, what I have written down is it is considered long-lasting, adds a fresh and natural bouquet to floral compositions, and it most closely resembles like a Turkish rose otto. There you go. There's another terroir rose from Turkey. Then we have Wardia. Wardia is a very powerful floral rose blend. And this is another reproduction of Rose de Mailly Absolute with a combination of naturals and synthetics. Let's see. There is Dorinia SA. Dorinia SA, I can't remember who produced it. Firmenich. We have a little F initial here. And this is a very fine rose auto style blend that encompasses the essence of the rose petals, and it can be used freely. There's a little restriction on its use. Lovely smelling stuff. We have 26 people tuned in. Feel free if you... Okay, so I'm concerned that I might have a little bit of a Wi-Fi issue tonight. I'm noticing that I just zoomed out. If folks can just verify with me the connection, the sound, just let me know in the chat. And it seems like we're out of that particular Wi-Fi issue at the moment, which looks good. Yeah, that was my concern. It doesn't look like I should be chopping at the moment, though. I saw something intermittent there. Sound is now A-OK. We can hear you. Darren, it's wonderful to see you. It was a bit choppy, but it's back. Excellent. I apologize for the inconsistencies. Wonderful, Emily. I am glad. Cut out for a moment, but you're fine for now. So basically, I was just discussing some of the rose bases. I'll go over those really briefly again in case the audio was an issue. We were talking about Dorinia SA, produced by Firmenich. It's a very fine rose auto style blend encompassing the essence of rose petals. It may be used freely. There's no restrictions on this. I was also chatting about the Wardia base, which is a reconstruction of Rose de Mailly. And I was talking about Rose Jivko earlier, another base that is used by perfumers, reconstruction of the blossoming rose, fresh, natural smelling, combination of synthetics and natural materials, all proprietary, unless somebody is floating around with a GCMS that breaks down everything that's in these proprietary bases. Good to see you here, Sean. Thank you for verifying. Okay, thank you. Okay, excellent. Scent of the day, Oud Alazan, word release from Hermes, but the rose is beautiful, no denying it. Excellent. Now, I think I do have a few other rose bases here that I wanted to chat about until we get into more sort of a gray area and into just bare components, bare synthetic materials, aroma chems. I believe, okay, we have one here, Centifo leather. I'm going to open this little vial. I have a little vial's worth of it. Yeah, this is a very intriguing one. Centifo leather or Centifo leather. Rose leaves. This is a recently developed material that was released by Firmenich that has this rose top note, but it also is very green. So it suggests not only the rose flowers, but also the leaves, some fruitiness to it, and it can be used in traces to a great effect. Apparently, from my notes here, the suggestion is 0.1% to 2% of the concentrate, with higher levels giving a distinctive rose top. Lower levels have more of a generic brightening effect. Onward we go. Okay. Phenoxanol is another one. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to dig out the phenoxanol here and smell it as we go along. Of course, I'm not going to smell all of these because some of them are very powerful. Phenoxanol is another one. It's a diffusive, fresh, floral rose absolute type, very long-lasting, economical to use, sort of as a replacement for an expensive rose oil or absolute effect. But now what I want to do, since we went over all of the naturals and bases, we're gonna break it down to the bare components of rose, the fundamentals that put together the way that a recognizable rose would smell like. Philippe, thank you. Rose de Mai. I keep on wanting to say Mai. To Rose de May, Rose de May, Rose de May. Thank you so much. That's another lapse that I fall into with May. Because it should be May, much like the month. It refers to the month of May. Thank you, Philippe. I appreciate it. Sean H. I know it's a weird rose subjectively, but my mind always wanders to Imitation Man by Amouage. I think it's worthy of a mention when discussing rose, for sure. So the first bare component, the first elemental component that I feel is worth chatting about here is something that is called geraniol. Let me see if I can locate my geraniol on this haphazard mix here. I have the geraniol cur. This is actually produced by IFF. Geraniol. This is something that can be naturally extracted or it could be synthesized. If it's naturally extracted, it usually comes from Palmarosa, which is a type of plant that has rose and geranium qualities to it. Many similar components. We're going to talk about geranium a little bit. We're not going to focus on geranium because it's such a beloved note. I feel like it would be doing it a disservice to sort of tack it on as an afterthought with rose. But the two are very much kindred. And then geraniol, the origins is geranium. This is a top note. It's sheer, it's fresh. It tends to be an extender of rose. Geraniol is also a huge percentage of the scent of rose. It derives from geraniol itself. This particular version of it is called geraniol cur. It's stronger and it has more character and lift than your standard geraniol. It's used in all types of fragrances, like rose accords, other florals, functional perfumery, and geraniol, to me, it is very much like the leaves of a rose geranium. So when you're smelling rose geranium, which is the type of geranium, Pelargonium graveolens, that is used in perfumery, the great majority of its aroma comes from geraniol. That's the first essential one. The next one is citronellol. Citronellol. So who can tell me What would you imagine has the highest amount of citronellol in it? Citronellol. Where do you think that comes from? Where do you think that the origin of that name? Why is it called that? Can anybody in the chat tell me? Thank you. 27 people tuned in. Citronellol. What do you think of when you hear that? What does it remind you of? Think of mosquitoes. I'm not going to wait too long. And there you go, citronella. Citronella is a type of botanical. It's a plant. It has its own essential oil. That oil is used in citronella candles. It has a repellent effect. It's a nervine. It's a neurotoxin to insects, so they don't want to go near it. But citronellol is also makes up a big portion of the scent of rose. Citron candles. So citronellol it's naturally occurring constituent in many different essential oils. We already talked about citronella. It's also in geranium. It's also in rose. It's also in many citruses. It's in various types of herbs. May also have it. Lemon balm, which is also called melissa. What do you call it? Mei Chang, Litsea cubeba. Lemongrass. So this material is naturally obtained through the fractionation of geranium essential oil, and it's very clean and crisp and diffusive, and it has that je ne sais quoi sort of rosiness to it that just puts together. It's one piece of that puzzle in creating rose. Hey, Mishi. Scent of the day, Sa Majeste la Rose, one of the rosiest perfumes on me. Very lovely choice there. Tiki torch oil. Yeah. Often does have the citronella in it. So that's citronellol. This happens to be an L-citronellol, which is produced by Takasago. So this is a much more refined version of citronellol. And then the next one, I have a big bottle of it. This is phenyl ethyl alcohol. Phenyl ethyl alcohol. I don't think I can really focus with this camera. I don't have a very fancy one. It's an upgrade from my laptop one that I was using for a while. But this is phenyl ethyl alcohol. I got this one from Perfumer's Apprentice. And phenyl ethyl alcohol, it can be naturally extracted from cassia, which is a type of cinnamon, not to be confused with cassis, otherwise known as blackcurrant. It can also be synthesized. It's transparent in its profile, warm. It is sort of a middle note. It's honey, rosy, petal-like, somewhat green. With that phenyl, whenever you hear phenyl, that material is going to be somewhat honey-like or beeswax-like or almost verging on Uranus, depending upon how strong it is. This, however, doesn't have that, but it does have this delicate honey feel to it. And we'll be discussing later how certain rose accords lean more in this direction, whereas some may lean more in the geraniol direction, and then still others may lean into the next group of perfume materials that we're going to be talking about, which is the rose ketones. Rose ketones, which are my favorite. And I may not actually have them here, but we will nonetheless talk about them a little bit. Can anybody tell me? Can anybody out there tell me anything about rose ketones? Does anybody already have somewhat of a familiarity with it? With them, rather? Well, they're very important in creating rose, and they're not used in abundance. They're very high impact, and they are somewhat restricted. Okay. Interesting that citronelle comes from geraniums. I hated geraniums as a kid, but I always loved the citron candles. So the geraniums that you had as a kid, it depends on what kind of geraniums they were. Whether they were pelargoniums or the geraniums that are often planted in gardens, house plants. Those geraniums, house geraniums, are actually in a different family of plants. They're the true geraniums, actually, botanically, but they're not the ones that are actually used in perfumery. It is those plants that are in the pelargonium family. So I just wanted to clarify that. Are you talking about the ones with the ruffled lobed leaves and the big red flowers or the big pink flowers? Very showy, abundant, pretty affordable. If you're talking about those geraniums, those are not the geraniums that are used in perfumery. That makes sense. That does make sense because of the probably the high citronellal content of the different materials, because there's citrus top and some florals in it as well. It's so funny that a big bottle of an extraction of or essential oil is a 10 milliliter bottle. Yeah, and some only need be even tinier than that. The geraniums that my dad planted were musty and dusty smelling and always made me choke a bit. Big fuzzy green leaves. Yeah, those are not pelargonium. Those are not pelargonium gravelans, certainly. The scented geraniums are not necessarily dusty. The leaves may be somewhat fuzzy, but not necessarily as fuzzy. And the flowers are nothing to really write home about. They're very tiny, not so showy flowers. So rose ketones are fascinating because they're the ones that shade and tint and create that overall effect of a rose. Those sort of back notes or undertones, I guess you could say. They can be very tobacco-like, winey, wine-like, fruity. So I'm going to talk about a few of those rose ketones, and we're going to start off with one of my favorites, which happens to be called Damascenone. And this is used in very small quantity in a rose, in a final formula. This is very strong, and it's brimming with these rosy black currant-like raisin and plum notes. It's rich but sheer. There's tobacco facets, there's tea facets to it. One of my favorite smelling materials. Then we have Damascone Alpha, which is a diffusive, fruity, floral, green apple-like, plum-like. There's the Damascone Delta, black currant-like, very diffusive, used in trace amounts. A little of it goes a very long way in creating an effect. Interesting fruity, tobacco, earthy, dried fruit, plum raisin aspects to them. There's also beta Damascone, Damascol 4, which I have right here in a little vial. Damascol 4 is produced by IFF, very distinctive and deep. It's peppery and woody and fruity and spicy. Some of it kind of reminds me a little bit of Davana oil, which is a type of oil from a plant in the Artemisia family that smells very plum-like and very wine-like. These are just fascinating materials, but they're very restricted, and which is okay because very little needs to be used in order for them to have an effect. There's also Scone, which is a proprietary rose ketone blend. Um, Saffron note in it as well. Uh, it's very clean smelling. Let's see if I have a few others that are still sitting in here. Also, a few bases that I haven't talked about either. There's a Satilia base, which is quite lovely. So I should have talked about this with the bases earlier. This one is very heavy in a material that I'll be talking about a little bit called Rosalba. That one will not be solved. So yeah, that's the rose ketones. I won't get too much into the chemistry of it. I don't want to get too heady here, but ketones are an integral part of perfumery. There's another one, Jiviscone. Go over that a little bit. This is a Givaudan cap. It used to be captive. It's a complex odor: floral, spicy, fruity, woody, herbaceous. It's a very complex odor picture. A lot of different rose ketones that are at the disposal of the perfumer. Yes. Megaran, I believe that, and since you've mentioned it, I can bring it out here. I have it. Nectar is what I would say is a very Damascene heavy rose. And when I smell it, I think of a rose. The rose accord in this very much leans in a Damascene heavy direction. Even though, if we're talking about percentage, it's still a tiny percentage, but a little bit more than what you find in, say, like more of a honeyed rose or a green rose or another direction. This is amped up a little bit more to get that wine like dark red, raisin, dried fruit, plum kind of feel. Uh-oh, a bit muffled. Let me know if that's still the case. Darren grows Rosa rugosa in the garden. It is heavenly smelling and very hard. They're tenacious organisms. Absolutely. I'll be back in 1 second. Okay, so the little Wi-Fi symbol in the corner is gone. So let me know. I'm noticing a correlation here. When that appears, it seems like there's compromised Wi-Fi, and then when it disappears, I seem to be back in business. So if anybody who's tuned in right now, just let me know if everything is sounding okay, if I need to make any additional adjustments. I don't think that's dumb at all. I think that is quite a suitable description. Great, great. I am noticing something though, and when I have a little Wi-Fi symbol coming up, it would be over here where I'm looking in the corner. On my end, I notice that my sound and my signal, my it's getting a little choppy. So right now it looks good. So hopefully I won't continue to have some issues. It could have to do with the Wi-Fi at the moment. Perfect. Thank you. I do apologize for those issues. All right, we're gonna let's see. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the others. We actually covered the building blocks of a rose. So the building blocks being citronelle, geraniol, phenyl ethyl alcohol, damascones. There's other things that accent it as well. Think about it. If you were to do GCMS of rose essential oil, rose absolute, the headspace, you'd have all these different components. And this is where some of the synthetics come in. So we're really going to start talking about a lot of those synthetics. All those other building blocks can be synthesized naturally or using a feedstock that is not natural. But we're going to go into that a bit because we're about 47 minutes into the stream. So I'm just going to start pulling out some of them here. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for liking. If anybody hasn't already, we have 28 people who are tuned in. Please hit the thumbs up. Please hit the like. It helps the algorithm. And yeah, it does wonders for the YouTuber. Here's an interesting one that I want to talk about. I don't think I could. There are a lot of materials that are used in composing rose. So I could never go through all of them in one single live stream. We would have to go through the second hour. Out of all of the different categories that we could look at, rose has among the most that you can use to compose it, to construct it. So we're going to highlight probably the ones that are most noteworthy, I would say, in composing rose. So the one I like to talk about is cis rose oxide. Cis rose oxide is some very cool stuff. This is what is responsible for giving some of those very thin top layers, those very, very it's very metallic. It's you hear the name oxide. This is actually an oxide used in perfumery. I think there's a Lavo rose oxide that's used as well. There's a high odor strength to it. It is recommended if you smell it in 1% dilution or less. I'm not smelling this right out of this. This is pure. Very green, floral, powdery, metallic. It can be used in traces to add sort of like a little bit of that metallic character. It can enhance even berry and fruit accords as well, and also geranium. It lifts. So if you don't know what that means, lifting means elevating. It means like pulling everything out. Something can seem heavy and not really diffusive and not really. It gives something that lifts it. Just think about it. It's pulling it out. It's making it diffuse. It's making it go upward and outward and blooming. Lifting causes that bloom, so it feels more three-dimensional, and that's what cis rose oxide does. There are some roses in perfume that have a little bit more of that extra cis rose oxide, so they almost smell kind of like a gilded rose, like a metallic rose, like a silvery rose. Fascinating stuff. And I was going to talk a little bit about two materials that are also used in peony accords. We're going to talk about those very briefly. One of them is called Piumosa. Now, peony and rose do have different scent profiles, but they're kind of adjacent, we'll say. They're closely related. So we'll find that some rose materials are used for peony accords. We'll find these peony materials used for rose accords, depending upon the intention of the perfumer. So with Piumosa, this is also called peony alcohol. This odor is described as a very natural, floral, waxy, peony-like smell, kind of like mimosa-like, um, green, earthy, wet, dewy, very tenacious. Little goes a long way. It's a lovely floral ingredient. Now, there is also a nitrile called peony nitrile. It's also called peonile. Now, here comes the jokes. Peonile, yes, not penile. Peonile, Peonile. Penile is a nitrile, and nitriles are used in perfumery. I think I want to do a whole separate live stream one day to explain chemically what all of these are. What makes a ketone? What makes an alcohol? What makes a nitrile a nitrile? That's a whole other fascinating subject within itself. But penile is rosy, geranium, peony-like, grapefruit nuances, very fresh, very vibrant, very vivacious. It is used in multiple accords, including florals, roses, very powerful, very cool stuff. So those are the two that are also used in peony. There's even a musk. This is Rosa musk. This is produced by IFF. So Rosa musk is just as it sounds. It is a musky, cosmetic as well, floral, geranium, pear-like, violet-like as well. Kind of an ionone feel to it. Cool stuff. Here's the one that I was talking about earlier. This is Rosalva. This is one I'm not smelling right out of the container. Very powerful stuff. Rosalva is what gives an effect to rose that you could not possibly get from any naturals. It is this headspace sensation of rose because it gives like almost like an ozonic, dewy, watery, ethereal quality, tea-like, kind of like a, not tea-like, but like tea rose-like. So not to be confused, tea roses don't necessarily smell like tea. Tea rose-like. It's just ethereal is a great description for it. It has like almost these melon-like qualities to it, or peach, watermelon. But it just kind of accents like the sort of like the immediate aura of the rose. I kind of consider Rosalva giving the aura of a rose. Very powerful stuff. Very difficult for the beginner perfumer to use because you can easily overpower with Rosalva. So we have acetates. So we'll talk about acetates on a separate live stream when we talk about all these different categories of materials. Eternal acetate, not acetate. Oh, I'm getting it again. Bad Wi-Fi, bad. Fernando, hey, okay, it's gone away. The Wi-Fi signal, that little icon went away. I've been caffeinated. Yes, that's actually one of the Megaran that I'm going to be talking about in the second hour. Yes, sadly discontinued. You're right, Darren. Yeah, total like metallic rose oxide going on in the top notes of Rive Gauche. Okay, good. I'm not a bad person because I have, a dirty mind. I have a dirty mind, bathroom humor too. Thank you for your patience while these intermittent lapses in my Wi-Fi signal occur. So back to business. Geranyl acetate, not geritol acetate. Geranyl acetate. So acetates have a tendency to be very much top notes. They are enhancing, how, a certain accord begins, how a certain note begins. And as you can imagine, this is sort of geranium like. It can be naturally extracted from Palmarosa. That's the plant that I was mentioning earlier. Fresh, rosy, herbal. So it can kind of lend that herbal quality to a rose, that certain ineffable, uh, it's hard to explain herbal quality. Rosy Rain Super. This is an interesting one. Very high impact material, very robust material, very stable material. So it ends up being used in a lot of functional fragrance. So rose scented detergents, rose scented functional products, cleaning products if they happen to be rose. There's a lovely rose, the lovely rose scented Myers. I feel like has some Rosarain Super to kind of keep it intense and keep it diffusive. So it's very high impact, very versatile, used in small quantities in perfume. If you overuse this, you're kind of crossing over into a certain territory that's less fine perfume and more functional. So you have to be very careful when you're using that. And then we get into the phenyl ethyls that I was talking about earlier. I'm telling you, there's a ton of them. I can't go over all of them. We're almost done with the first hour. We have phenyl ethyl pivalate. Phenyl ethyl pivalate. So phenyl ethyl pivalate, very honey-like. See, if you're noticing a trend, you want some of that honey-like quality in a perfume, so you're going to get it with these materials. This is in the same category as things like phenyl ethyl acetate. That is like a floral, fruity top note, rosy honey, phenyl ethyl isobutyrate. Butyrates are another category. Very heavy, fruity, honey, tea-like, yeasty, waxy, rosy. The phenyl ethyl family is an interesting group of materials and are definitely useful in constructing a rose. And you get plenty of others. You have nerol, you have nerol acetate, you have rhodonol, and it just goes on and on and on. So it's fascinating, all the things that can be used when creating perfume. Rose perfume, that is. Rose essence, this is another base here. I got a lot of them, a whole box worth of them. Here's the phenyl ethyl isobutyrate. And yeah, there you go. So I hope that first hour was useful in kind of giving you a primer, giving you sort of a rough idea of what the perfumer uses in creating a rose note or a rose accord. And as always, if you have any questions, just put them in the comments. If I don't get to them right away, I'll make sure they're starred, so I'll get to them as soon as I can. We have 26 people who are tuned in at the moment, and we are approaching the top of the next hour. And Megaran says, my wife loves Miss Dior roses and roses. That is a lovely one. I have sampled that. All right, so I'm going to be back in just a moment. We're going to take a brief intermission. And in the next hour, we're going to be talking about some of the rose fragrances that are in my collection. So stay tuned. Oh, hi. Just hydrating. Excuse me whilst I hydrate. Thank you. 24 people tuned in. If you haven't spoken up, don't be shy. Don't be a wallflower. You're welcome here. Everybody is nice. Just tell us, what are you wearing? Or what would you like to wear if you can't wear anything right now? Or do you have any questions on rose fragrances? Do you have any questions on the rose fragrant materials that we were talking about? Just let me know. And as usual, just want to plug the Buy Me a Coffee. Your support helps grows this channel. There is a direct link in a pinned comment in the comments section. So one coffee is $5. If you purchase 6 coffees, you get a free sample pack. US and Canada only. All right. So I have so many rose fragrances that I enjoy, and I don't even know where to begin. Where does one begin? Well, I guess, we can start with some fragrances that have been traditionally marketed to the gents, to the male member of the species, men. Of course, all of these I consider to be unisex. There's one thing that I can say for certain, that there is no gender in perfume. And that's as much as I will say about that. One of the earliest men's fragrances to feature a notable rose note is one of my favorite fragrances of all time, and that would be I-VIII Rouge from Guerlain. But this is an example of where rose is just one part of the great whole, because this isn't merely a rose fragrance for anybody who's familiar with it. But the rose is what gives it really its character. I think the rose in this, and the vanilla, this is one of the first times that we saw vanilla in such a high quantity, far exceeding things like, Donna Canu. There weren't too many others that did. This was really, in a way, a groundbreaking fragrance marketed to men. And then we have beautiful bottle, Van Cleef & Arpels Pour Homme, rose via leather. This is another great vampire type of fragrance. Is anybody a fan of this? Sadly discontinued for, as far as like widespread production. But if you were to go to, I think somebody had told me, if you go to the Van Cleef & Arpels boutique or headquarters, they still can fill a bottle of this for you. It's in very limited production, but widespread production ceased a few years ago. And we were chatting about Acteur from Loris Ezaro, released in 1989. This was so unusual. It was out of step with anything else that was going on at the time. It was almost dead on arrival as far as commercial success. It was discontinued after about 6 years and then relaunched in the 2000s. And both versions smell quite lovely. And we were talking about how earlier this is very much like a rose ketone heavy, Damascone kind of heavy rose in this one, via sort of like this fougere backbone. It's cool stuff. And is anybody familiar with Les Parfums de Rosine? This is Rose d'Homme. So this is intended for the man. And for those who would appreciate Habit Rouge, if somebody wants Habit Rouge and it's deconstructed to just rose and powder and musk and moss, then this is your baby here. I don't know if this is still in production. But Rose Dame, another gentleman's rose. And a few years ago, Etro released something curiously named Man Rose. Yes, Man Rose, because they want to make clear this is not a lady's rose. This is not a floofy rose, not a frilly rose. This is Man Rose. So this is meant for the men. It's kind of a funny name, but it's a lovely one. It's peppery, it's spicy, it's woodier, but it is still at its heart very much a rose scent. And going back quite some time ago, one of the earlier fragrances from Penhaligon's, we have the Hammam Bouquet, and this is a very antiquated style fougere, which sees the pairing of lavender with rose and a very civet-like musk in it. This is very much an acquired taste. This smells like time travel. This is transportive to me, not modern at all. Not for the average person, not for the person who's looking to get compliments, because this is just for the sheer elation of the perfume connoisseur, not for somebody who's looking to score some points with the general populace. But this, I love Hammam Bouquet. I don't know if Hammam Bouquet is even still in production. That's something I'm not sure of. Hey there, Duncan. I was curious about that too, but I'm not really in a rush to find out if I end up in Canada, which is pretty much the only place I can sample Guerlain fragrances. Not many options here in the US to do it. But if I'm back in like Montreal, I'll try to seek it out. Very cool, Darren. Wearing a sample of upcycled Rose Absolute from Elamar Naturals. Neat. And supply and demand. Scent of the day, Blue Talisman or Taliman from Ex Nihilo. Nihilo. Tom. Hello, Tom. Two that you enjoy. Rostracto from Rogue and Herman from Eldo. État libre d'orange. Oh, Herman Cote. Yep. Mm-hmm. Catching on now. Okay. So a great, cheap, but cheerful budget rose that I consider to be an excellent reference rose is from the Perfumer's Workshop Limited Tea Rose. Now, if you want to have a good representation of what a phenyl ethyl alcohol, honeyed, sheer, elevated, bright, dewy rose, this is a good example of it, and it is meant to capture the smell of a tea rose, which, as I was mentioning at the closer to the start of the stream, you can't get any material out of tea roses. You have to reconstruct a tea rose. In fact, you have to reconstruct a rose no matter what natural materials you get from it, but the tea rose doesn't even yield enough material, scented material. So this has been around since the 70s, still in production, still smells fantastic. I think you can still purchase it for $13 if I'm not mistaken, maybe even less. Good stuff. I'll spray some on me right now. No frills, just a good old classic rose scent. I have a soft spot for it. Ungaro 2, Vodka Rose, that's a good choice as well. Really scarce, Guillain Axis in the US. Yeah, for the most part. I mean, some of the big sellers you can find in department stores, but I don't know where I could walk into a store here, at least in New England, and sample the Habit Rouge parfum. Jan Vasnier's Toy Boy for Moschino. Hi there, my friend. Maginosis, hello. Great, always great to see you in the chat as well. And Philippe says, I love Opus X from Amouage. Rosy, metallic, and it's paired with a varnish accord. Works very well together. I imagine there is a certain dosage of that cis rose oxide. And Chopard, Happy Felicia or Felicia Roses is another one that my missus loves. Very nice. Good old tea rose. Rose often makes an appearance in Chypres like Gucci No. 1, which I foolishly didn't set aside. Long discontinued, excellent one, Guy Robert, and also this lovely one too. This is one of my favorite fragrances. This is Coriandre, the Eau de Toilette from Jean Couturier, Paris. And this is Rose via coriander, green notes, galbanum, powder, resin, labdanum moss, and it is a time-tested classic. Easy to obtain this. You can go into drugstores in Montreal and they still have this in a Jean Coutu. Coriandre is excellent. In a similar vein, but with a 90s panache to it, would be Cardin Rose Cardin. Look at this bottle. Talk about fancy. Look at this. Very, very much like Memphis group kind of looking. Very modernist. And this is sort of like a coriandre taken to a 90s level with sort of like a 90s palette for the perfumer. A little bit more fresh, a little bit more diffusive, a little bit more watery, but still very much a rose chypre. Some hot stuff. You can still get the vintage version of this for not expensive at all. It is a Cardin after all. That's an excellent rose. And back to the chat very briefly. Epic Habit Rouge, phenoxanol, mefrosol is a good metallic facet for roses too. I meant to chat a little bit earlier about phenoxanol in the first hour. You're absolutely right. Hello there, my friend. Hi, Ray. Good evening to you. Good to have you here. Oh, excellent. Interesting that rose is a note for Entaeus Porum as rose, as Entaeus is very masculine men's fragrance. Yeah. Well, we could get into the whole cultural perspective on rose and whether it's perceived as masculine or feminine, depending upon where you are and what time in history. For instance, in the Middle East, it's very much a masculine smell, the smell of rose. Men are the ones who wear the rose fragrances in the Middle East. This is Calvin Klein, the original Calvin Klein, released in 1978. Another gorgeous rose chypre. Lovely, lovely stuff. This beautiful red box that it's in. It's another great rose fragrance. And most, if not all of these, I've written full reviews on. So if you want to really get my more extrapolated thoughts on these, you can read the reviews. They're everywhere. They're on Base Notes. They're on Fragrantica. You could locate them on Instagram as well if you find the hashtag. L'Ombre d'Anzelot, a lovely diptyque, a diptyque that was released over 40 years ago. And this is Rose via Blackcurrant, a cassis in rose. It's one of my favorites from Diptyque in the EDT form, because the EDT form seems to breathe more. It's much more green. It's much more spacious, I guess you could say, and diffusive. L'ombre dans l'eau from Diptyque. Duncan's scent of the day is Vermeil pour Homme. Yeah, I can see the similarities between the two as well. I'm with you there. Coriandre by Jean Couturier is also very rosy. I'm glad that I mentioned it earlier. I agree. I might be... I'm going to try to not to repeat some of the comments here. I rarely pick up rose and Antaeus, maybe on real humid days, 85 degrees plus, but not much. It's interesting how that occurs, how we may find that certain elements of a perfume come out depending upon how dry our skin is, or how moisturized, or how humid it is, or how dry it is in the atmosphere itself, the times of year, and how that can be unique for a certain person too. And Algebrea says, what I don't like about Antaeus, though, is the tonalid coumarin accord, which is a persistent freshness. I suppose that could be an acquired taste. Thank you. All right, take two. L'ombre dans l'eau. L'ombre dans l'eau. Am I saying it right now? L'ombre dans l'eau. L'ombre dans l'eau. L'ombre dans l'eau. Got to get started with that Rosetta Stone. Got to get back into the French. Yeah, that's understandable. It's not subtle. I don't know. I have a soft spot for it. Hey, AM. Howdy. Scent of the day, 1828 Histoire de Parfum. Okay, moving onward. We've been focusing a great deal on 70s and 80s fragrances. We have one more here. I do have a more recent version of the EDP of Nahima from Guerlain. This is sort of a deconstructed rose. So puzzling, so perplexing, and then it all falls together in this beautiful manner in the heart. So that is one that is definitely deserving of mention when talking about rose fragrances. And who is familiar with Rose et Noir? Rose et Noir from Miller Harris. Rose et Noir. This is very dark, velvety. This to me smells like the fantasy dark velvet red rose. Rose et Noir. I am? Oh, gee, thanks. I'm trying. There's things that just have slipped and have fallen on the to the wayside over the years. Some things have stuck with me over years, but some pronunciations just I completely forgot them. So you're always helpful when I slaughter the French. I know, I miss the B bottles as well. I don't really know how I feel about the inverted heart bottles being the... Like, I felt like the inverted heart bottles were really just meant for Le Bleu and Mitsuko. Like, it's kind of strange just seeing them all with that particular bottle. I mean, some of them made... I know that they re-released Follerome, and that had the inverted heart bottle. I don't know. I'm just not crazy about it either, but... Over time, we'll get over it. It happens over and over again. Calon has done it, done over their bottles after a few years, several times over. Guerlain likes to do it. It's just confusing and annoying, but what can you do, really? I think they're just attempting to make themselves more relevant to the consumer in whatever way that they can. I haven't, and it's because I haven't sampled it yet, Archive 69. But I do have Eau de Protection. Now, Archive 69 to me is much more like a pink pepper kind of unusual. I guess there's some rosiness in that as well. I'm just going by my memory and learning about Archive 69 because I haven't even smelled it. But I do have Eau de Protection. Eau de Protection. So it is the means of protecting yourself in a bubble of unapproachable rose. Well, it is approachable, but I don't know. I mean, the concept is that I think that, you know, in the first half hour or so, it's really bold. It's like rose and geranium, and it's very peppery. It's very spiky. There's like a sort of like vetiver-like elements, but not quite vetiver. And then it really softens it to something very beautiful. So it's definitely not linear. And this is a newer edition. And actually, Algebraeus, between you and our friend Love is a Scent, the two of you convinced me to seek this out, and I am very impressed with it. I think it's an excellent work. I do want to sit down and really put together my thoughts on this. Eau de Protection. Another one in a similar vein, at least in this sort of like modernist kind of deconstructing the idea of rose, pushing certain elements of rose into directions heretofore unseen, is Jean-Claude Ellena's Rose en Cuir, which some people like to refer to as geranium and vetiver, but I think that is a sort of a disservice to it, because to me, this is it is sort of a representation of rose and leather, just not in a conventional manner. It's sort of, I mean, I'm not saying it's like a mugli, you know, this is Nesse un Pip, but it is rosy to me, and it's leather-like, at least in my idea of like a leather chypre, because there's the IBQ in this as well, and just a very green, verdant, strong geranium-like rose. And rumor has it that this was heavily the inspiration for Jean-Claude Ellena happened to be which one? Rocha Rose, if I'm not mistaken. Rocha Rose. So I love these 30 milliliter bottles. This is a great choice, a great decision rather, on the part of Frederick Malle, because had these existed sooner, I probably would have gotten more bottles in the 30 mil. But that's Rose en Cuir, Rose et Cuir. Very nice, very nice. And on the topic of Guerlain bottles, the inverted heart feel like higher quality glass than the Latte La Métier ones. Duly noted. Toy Boy seems very bright, fresh, and natural. Considering it's a modern designer, it's impressive. And Algebrae says, I have to give Rose en Cuir a proper chance. Probably 30 mil will be enough for my collection. Yeah, like I said, if they had the 30 mils for a lot of them, I would have just gone for that instead of like even a 50 mil. I think it's great that they don't have them for all of the releases, a selection of them. I have the Rose en Cuir, and also En Passant, Olivia Jacobetti's lovely lilac composition, which I will be sharing a review on when I do a whole week of lilac fragrances. Can you believe it? A whole week? 5. I'll be sharing reviews on 5 lilac fragrances. That's going to be at the end of April. Meleg Birch Tar Russian Leather has a great rose note, probably my favorite. And La Fille de Bel Air. I love this one. This is nice. Very nice. And you know what's interesting is Palmarosa is listed on the notes pyramid. We were talking about Palmarosa as a feedstock for things like citronellol and geraniol, that plant, that weird obscure plant. Like, what's Palmarosa? This is a very geraniol, citronellol forward rose, very deep, somewhat jammy, but not overly sweet. Just gorgeous, gorgeous. It's my favorite rose from Serge Lutens. Some people prefer La Majeston Rose, which I think is quite nice. I think that would be Tea Rose if Tea Rose was a high-end perfume. Tea Rose still smells nice. The Rosalva is really coming through. The Rosalva that I was talking about earlier. That dewiness, that dewy soapiness. But this is my favorite from Serge Lutens as far as the roses. I've heard mixed things about the newest rose, Algebraius. You said that you weren't entirely impressed with that one, that it was actually a little too much like our dear tea rose, actually, not too inventive. So I'm not really in a rush to find out about it. If I run into a sample, then hey, I'll give it a whirl, but I'm not eagerly anticipating it, given that description. And one of my favorite rose soliflores comes from an unlikely house, and that house would be Jo Malone. Jo Malone Red Roses cologne. This has a lot of those phenols, phenyl ethyl this and that, phenyl ethyl this and that, and then some, and it's waxy, beeswaxy, and it's honeyed, and it's almost like animalic and musky in the dry down. It starts off this beautiful, realistic, gorgeous rose, and I love how it dries down very musky and almost animalic. I almost am convinced that there's a little bit of animalis base in this, just a tiny bit, with some beeswax absolute, some honey, a lot of honey actually. Excellent. It is impressive for a Jo Malone release. I only have 3 in my collection. I'm very hit or miss. I feel it's very hit or miss with that house. A lot of them are beautiful with the top notes, and the concepts are really compelling, but then they just leave something to be desired. But there are a handful from that house that strike me as quite enjoyable, and this is my favorite from Jo Malone, Red Roses cologne, which does wear a lot more like an eau de toilette, if that's any concern to you. And Duncan says, I wore that Helfetti Dark Rose yesterday. Strong stuff. Was de Nuit from Lutens to me today is the closest to a knowing style rose you can buy. I actually have to be honest. So I was so affirmative in my decision that I have my favorite from Serge Lutens without having actually smelled Rose de Nuit. I haven't smelled it. That could very well change if I were to smell Rose de Nuit. But that's good to know. Rose de Jamal, Les Indemadables, and Zaharoff Rose are my fave roses. Peat Moss and Rose. Very clever. Paco Rabanne, Tenere, and Encens Mythique are some of my favorite roses. Yes, musk from Lorenzo Villoresi is a gorgeous rose. Powdery, musky rose. I can't decide if it's a rosy musk or a musky rose, but that's excellent too. I'm surprised I actually didn't set that aside, because that's an excellent composition from Lorenzo Villoresi. And Michi says, I have a tiny sample of Vial of Rose de Nuit, a very quiet, mossy, earthy rose. It sounds very pleasant. Got a couple others here, and then we can chat about. One that was mentioned earlier, sadly discontinued, from Aramis. This is a calligraphy rose, this is a rose amber. And I fell in love with this a few years ago. Still have a soft spot for it, but this is very much like an ambery, benzoin, labdanum, vanillic rose. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. I think this was actually intended for the Middle Eastern market. And then here in the States, it was dropped into the gray market, and people caught on to how wonderful it was. I also have calligraphy saffron as well, which is quite lovely. And these were discontinued a few years ago. I don't know how hard it is to get these nowadays, but very well done. Very good stuff. And another one that was released to the Arabic market from Clinique, Beyond Rose. Beautiful bottle, if you can see here. Sounds like rose windows. Some good stuff. This is Clinique Beyond Rose. And this is a very woody, ambery, Middle Eastern style rose. Although it is mercifully not too heavy on the oud. There is a bit of an oud base in it, but it's very tastefully included. It isn't overbearing. Truth be told, I am not a fan of very assertive rose ouds. I was enthralled with the novelty of them when they were starting to come up a number of years ago, but those really start to grate on me after a while. But this one is just the right dose of an oud base in it, without it necessarily being a rose oud, which is good. Unfortunately, I think this one is also discontinued and hard to find, and I don't know if it is moral for me to hype this one up, but it's lovely. And those are all the ones that I had set aside, all the roses that tickled my fancy. So, may I ask what type of rose is in that rose, if you know? May I ask what type of rose is in that one, if you know? Philippe, which one? Which one of the perfumes? Aramis, Calligraphy Rose, or Clinique Beyond Rose? Just let me know which one you're referring to. Both of them have a somewhat similar rose. I'd say that the Aramis Calligraphy Rose is sort of a juicier, berry, fruity kind of rose, with maybe a little bit of like tobacco facets to it, maybe. And then the Clinique Beyond Rose moves a little bit more into like the dewy green, a bit more of the oxide kind of rose, maybe, or I don't know. That's the difference, I guess, between the two of them. As far as like what kind of rose they're trying to represent, I think more of like just like an abstract kind of rose. I don't know. Like some fragrances, they are really trying to capture like a Rosa Damascena or a May Rose. Not like Oud Satin Mood. That's definitely that's a different category of rose. Not quite like that. It's a little bit more restrained. And Algebraic says Calyx is also a rose, actually, but with strong emphasis on green and sulfurous notes. That one I do think has a bit of Rosalva in it to create that effect. John Matthew, JJ, do you find Réveillon French Line and Azzaro Actor to be similar? Which one do you prefer? Between the two, I think that Azzaro Actor is more, it is unique. French Line is quite lovely. It's nice. It is sort of Réveillon's answer to the popular Antaeus, which had been on the market for a few years. It was sort of there. Me too. I'm going to do my version of this. But I find the dry down to be a little bit more enjoyable, actually, in French Line than I do in Antaeus. So if you were to ask me Antaeus versus French Line actually edges over Antaeus. But between French Line and Azzaro Acteur, I'm more interested in wearing Ecter if given the choice between the two. 28 people tuned in. Can somebody in the chat give me a count on the likes? I think what I might do is check on my own as well. We want to try to aim for 30 likes right now. We have 29 people tuned in. And it would be really lovely if we at least match the amount of viewers to the live stream. I am looking right now. Checking that out. We have 29. Oh, wow. Okay. Very nice. Let's get that up to 35. Let's try to hit 35. Oh, now it says 28. I thought it said 29. Somebody changed their mind. Hey, we all change our mind now and then. Let's try to get that up to 35. Let's aim for 35 likes on the live stream. Algebraist, what is La Nuit from Rabanne like? I never got to smell it, and it's a legendary animalic rose, apparently. It is exquisite. It is a very sultry, ambery chypre hybrid with lots of voluptuous florals, including rose, civitone, animalis, tonquitone, muskiness, dirtiness, amberiness. Just gorgeous, gorgeous stuff. Unfortunately, I wish it was easier for people to obtain. It seems to have skyrocketed in price. But if one is patient, hopefully a bottle can come up for not too exorbitant a price. But just, it's incredible. It's incredible stuff. It's one of the most distinct releases, I would say, from the 1980s. My humble opinion. Paroli says, French line would literally discolor my clothes. So let's say I didn't put it on my skin again. Oh my goodness. Discolored your clothes? I don't recall it doing that for me. It could have just been that batch or that particular bottle. That's unfortunate. Well, okay, we're up to 29. Let's try to hit 35. Let's try to hit 35 likes in the live stream. And Duncan says, French line seems very unique to me. That licorice note sets it apart. I love it. Thank you for putting feminine in quotes. I appreciate that touch. Yes, it would be. It was. Yeah, I agree. It was sort of like the women's answer to Kuros of its time, but not quite as aggressive, but pretty impressive in its skankitude. Howdy, Anuj. Hey, scent of the day today was GMV 2001 by Gianmarco Venturi. Great to have you here, Anuj. And I pretty much covered all of the rose fragrances that I set aside here. What I do plan to do next month is a combination because the two are they're like cousins. So I'm going to do iris and violet. So the next notes and accords will be iris and violet. So I'll be going over all the raw materials that are used in composing iris notes and accords and violet notes and accords. So we're going to be talking about things like ionones and irones and all that good stuff. Lots of cool things. We'll touch a bit on the difference between violet the flower and violet the leaf. So that will be a great conversation. Algebraist is wearing Cocoa EDT tonight. Lovely choice. Philippe asks, are there any rose fragrances that give you a yellow rose feel? Nice question. Yeah, because there's some yellow rose varieties, some tea roses that come in yellow that have a distinct aroma. My mother's favorite was the yellow rose. So to be honest with you, I imagine there might be some out there that are meant to evoke a yellow rose, but as far as being familiar, I can't say that I am. but that would be interesting to research. "30 people on. Let's try to hit 35 likes. I'm going to check out the Buy Me a Coffee tally right now. Let's see. And congratulations to Matt. Thank you so much for your contribution. It's much obliged. Once again, if you are so inclined, buy me a coffee. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You could buy 6. 6 will get you a sample pack. The link is in the pinned comment in the comment section. You can go directly to buymeacoffee.com/JosephColeP. And if you do purchase 6 coffees, you get a sample pack, US and Canada only. So, does anybody have any other questions on rose fragrances as far as what materials are put into a composition? Naturals, like, what does it mean to be a natural versus a synthetic? And can you create a rose without naturals? Or can you create a rose with only naturals? Well, it all depends on what the vision of the perfumer is, whether they want to do something that's realistic or more abstract, more surreal. It depends on whether or not they really want to represent the rose as the centerpiece of the composition, or to simply make things a little rosy. So there could be just a couple of things that are rosy that swim in the composition and lend that effect without there necessarily being a big, bold rose right in the middle. Yes, US and Canada have been added. Canada has been added. I will give an exception for the sample pack for Canada. When I was doing the four full bottle grab bag, I was only doing US only, but for the sample pack, I'm willing to do Canada. Do rose patchouli frags use any particular material more than others? Well, I think there is this tendency to want the rose that goes along with a rose patchouli to move a little bit more into the greener direction to complement the patchouli. So I kind of wonder if maybe you would have a bit more of like a geraniol heavy rose than, say, like a phenyl ethyl alcohol rose or a Damascone rose. But maybe even a Damascone rose would be good too, because of those earthier, jammier kind of wine-like and tobacco facets too. But I really think that it's up to the perfumer's vision. I bet you could run into all different rose patchoulis, and their approach to rose is entirely different from the other. So from looking at all the different roses that I have, it's interesting that I don't really have a very forward rose patchouli in my collection. And I know there are plenty out there. Portrait of a Lady I find to be nice, but it doesn't really resonate with me. It doesn't really speak to me. And neither does Eau Capitale from Diptyque. And those are both rose patchouli fragrances. So I think I'm still in the search for a rose patchouli that resonates with me. If anybody has suggestions of some others, I'm happy to hear you out. Recommendations for the rose patchouli. A fragrance that comes to mind that is a rose in excellent disguise. Ooh, rose in excellent disguise. I know I often run across fragrances that I am convinced rose is there, even if nothing suggests that is so. It's not shown in the notes pyramid. It isn't listed in the ad copy, but to me, it's just the rose is there. But a rose in excellent disguise could mean different things too. It could mean that the perfumer's intention was to conceal the rose amongst everything else and sort of sort of peeks out through the incognito. Yeah, I'd have to really think about that. Does anybody else have any kind of can think of anything that seem any kind of fragrance that seems like a rose that's in disguise? Well, you know what? There is Voleur de Roses um, from La Tisane Parfumeur, which I feel like is a rose that has been hijacked by the patchouli. Hi, what's wrong with me? That is the rose patchouli that I enjoy. Hi, this is me after a long day of work and, the end of the day. I forget. I actually do have a rose patchouli I enjoy, and it's Voleur de Roses. And that is almost kind of like a rose in disguise, but I don't know if it's really disguised or it's just um, being hijacked by the patchouli. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It's sort of like, it is the thief of roses. The patchouli is the thief, and it's overpowering the rose. It's like a rosy patchouli. It's excellent stuff. Hello, Regis Monkton. I just started watching. I'll try to watch it from the start later. Very well then. Noir de Noir doesn't. Noir de Noir. Oh God, Noir de Noir. I wore years ago. It was the first Tom Ford that I purchased. Must have been back in 2008 or 2009, not long after it was released, actually. And yes, that was one that I wore the hell out of. And that one is, I don't know how it holds up now, but it was pretty damn good back then. I thought now I have to do a review on that. I never replenished it. Once I had that bottle, I used it up. Then I bought one other bottle, used some of it, and then I sold it because I just wanted to make some money and I didn't want to hold on to it. But that is one too. Yeah. What is wrong with me tonight? I'm like kind of spacing out. There are some rose patchoulis that have spoken to me, and there's one I have right now that does. Noir de Noir, Velours de Roses. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. But I feel like that the lavender is more forward in that than the rose. So I don't really consider that to be like a rose. Like Rose is a supporting character in that one rather than like a lead, but it's there. But that's a great like aromatic patchouli. It's wonderful. Etienne Agner, Free Life in a similar vein. Peu de la Ligue. Yeah, Pro de la Ligue. I never even thought about that because I don't even really think about the patchouli as much. It's more like because it's so sheer. You know what I mean? It's so sheer and translucent and peppery and bright and it's not really a heavy patchouli, but you're right. That's another lovely one too. But to me, that's like kind of like another one where the rose wasn't like so forward to me that I was like I have to set that one aside. But my mind could be changed on that. I'll have to revisit it. Yeah, the Isoe super in that, which is what causes that peppery, spiky woodiness in it. John Matthew asked, do I have any experience with Tafe Rose, which I've seen listed as a note in some expensive Middle Eastern oils and attars? Yes. I was talking a little bit about Tafe Rose recently when I was chatting about Rose de Mai. Rose de May. Mai, right? Wait, Rose de May, right? Oh, God. Alex, am I saying it right? Rose de May. May. May like the month. Is vintage Paloma Picasso as sensational as they say? Yes. That's my answer, and I'm sticking to it. Yes, I think it is sensational, but you do have to get an older version of it. It's been kind of fucked up. And over the years, it has changed a great deal, and not for the better. And I'm going to stick around for about 10 more minutes. And then we'll wrap things up and round off a good 2 hours here. Have I smelled Fille une Rose de Kandahar by Andy Tower? Truth be told, I haven't really gotten into Andy Tower. If you recommend it, then I'll change my mind. But I don't know what it is about what I've smelled from his house. I don't. I just like I'm not really digging his style, or I haven't dug his style. But that's one I haven't tried of his. So Fille Rose de Kandahar. If you recommend it, I'll go seek out a sample. And somebody is a winner of a sample pack. It is a surprise winner. Paroli, you're a winner of a sample pack. So we'll be in touch. You're going to get a sample pack. And that is courtesy of a good friend of ours, but you're going to be getting a sample pack early. So we'll be in touch, and I'll be sending you one. And Algebraeus Vero Cairn has a honeyed rose. Do you like the idea of a lovely honey rose? Ooh, almond peachy and tobacco facets. I like the idea of peach and rose together. And you experience that somewhat in Guerlain's Nahima, but I'd love to see that in a further developed direction of peach and rose. So it sounds pretty good. I'll check that out. I'm writing it down now, even as we speak. I'm sold. Well, not sold on the bottle, but sold on sampling. So there may be hope for Andy Tower, at least as far as me, giving one of his fragrances the time of day. Oh, thanks. Feels like a warm hug. It feels warm like a hug. I like the sound of that. And maybe apricot more than peach. Of it. Sounds nice. Very nice. 26 people tuned in. I'm grateful for each and every one of you for tuning into these live streams. It means a great deal to me. And yeah, I'm one tired boy here. So like I said, we're going to be doing Iris and Violet next month. And then the month after that, I still haven't quite decided what it's going to be. So that will be in May. And then what I'll do is I'm going to have a hiatus from all live streams over the summer, save for monthly Effluvium summer sessions. And then when September starts again, I'll resume with the notes and accords. So we have two more, April and May. I just haven't decided what we'll do in May. If anybody recommends something. I'm in the Northern Hemisphere. I'm going to be in a spring/summer mood. So with that in mind, think about how your suggestions would fit into that mold. Spring, summer, what topics would be suited for that, for that kind of season. And the news says Rose Leger by Hervé Leger or Leger. Rose Leger by Hervé Leger is an interesting and underrated rose scent, although a tad more sweet than a rose scent should be. Making another note here. Rose Leger. Hervé Leger. And I'm trying to really make that French. Am I sure it's actually French? Chypre. Chypre. Just to kind of just talk about Chypres. Well, we did amber. We haven't done fougere yet either, now that I think of it. How about we do fougere? Does fougere work? And then we could do Chypre I feel like September and October are like perfect for Chypres. How does that sound? Does that sound like a good deal? We could do a fougere. So next month will be Iris, Violet, and then And then the next month, we can do the fougere. And when you do fougere, you can cover a lot of bases because you can talk about lavender, you can talk about geranium, you can talk about tonka / Marin. Suggestion. Perfect. So maybe what we can do to end the notes and accords season, we'll end it with fougere, and then we'll begin it in September with chypres. Sashka from 1993 is a great peach rose. Sashka. I'm always being enlightened. This is just a never-ending well of perfume. And that is from M. Meatcliffe, or Meatcliffe. M. Meatcliffe. I think I've heard of that one. Isn't it sort of like it's in sort of like a black egg-shaped kind of bottle or like a pear-shaped kind of bottle? Am I right? The Sashka? So that is what we will do. We are going to do Iris and Violet notes and accords next month, Fougeres in May, and then next season we'll start off with chypres, and then there's still more topics out there. There's a lot more to explore. Have you put your schnoz on Zelmis? Zelmis by Ellena, like Ellena Legrand? Is this a new one? I don't know about this one. Zelmis. I haven't heard about this. Is this a new release? And you know I'm a fan of Ellena. Let's see. Goodness. Oh, I'm really tired. I can't even read this French. Le Tutoriel des Amis by Ellena Legrand. An amber floral from 2017. I think I've read about this before, but just reading Zelmi, it didn't ring a bell. But now, yeah. Ooh, and this is rosy rose, peony, geranium. This sounds nice. I like how tea rose, it's compared to tea rose. It still smells nice to me. And one of my favorite sensible, concise reviewers, Gina Tabasco, says a beautiful vintage geranium rose combo. Who could go wrong with that? Yeah, I haven't tried that one. I haven't really seen it for sale. From the retailers who carry Ellena Legrand, it never comes up here in the States. So I kind of think it might be something I'd have to buy directly from them, you know? So the Sashka is a low-key gem, huh? Oh, so the men's is the... Okay, all right. So there's a men's Sashka and then... Okay, cool. Sashka was a nice welfare version of Le 10 from Balenciaga with a nice peach snow. Welfare version. It's so not PC, but I love it. That's awesome. Has a bit of saffron, I feel like. In the Zelmi. Yeah, I'd love to check that one out. I'm really trying to put myself on a complete block on adding anything else to my collection at this point. Like, I'm pretty happy where I am, so I'm willing to sample more stuff, but I'm doubting that any of these will become like bottles in my collection. But it's interesting. Yeah, at this point, as far as my collection, I'm at the point where I'm trying to do one in, one out. If I'm going to add something new, something's got to go, because it's gotten to be too big. It's gotten to be way too much. So we're at about 18 viewers right now. Things are really starting to wind down. We're past 2 hours. So I think what I will do is start to wrap things up here. To give you some updates, we do have some guests lined up for Effluvium. Next Tuesday, we have Nick Gilbert of the Bougie Bougies line. He is partnered with P. Long, who was a previous guest panelist last season for Effluvium. He will be our next guest Tuesday the 19th. And then 2 weeks after that, we will have perfume writer Stephen Matthews. And we're going to be talking about influencers, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and a lot of the ethical concerns, how it can be a little bit problematic to be guided by the influencer when the motives are not as transparent as they should be. So we'll be talking about that 2 weeks after. So those are the guests that are coming up. Anuj, thank you very much, my friend. It means so much to me. I appreciate that. Yeah, if you're at 50 right now and you feel stressed out about it, just keep it a very tailored and curated collection. Not everyone needs to create a museum like me, a library, an obsession, a pathology. I encourage you that if you feel like you want to kind of bring it to a certain point, kind of tie it up right there, by all means. And the samples, yeah, they're out of control. That's why I want to spread the wealth and get other people sampling and trying stuff out. It's going to be a tea without rose. Yeah, this is not going to be tea rose. This is just going to be plain old tea. Instead of having like, the rose that's up here. Wait, pointing up here. I can't point. See how I can't point to things very well. Yeah, there we go. Oh, it's right over here. See, I'm going to put like a tea. I'll put Kermit sipping tea when we do that stream right over here. Oh, I'm getting good at this. See, I'm pointing to it. See, that's a rose. All right. And on that note, I think it's probably a good idea for me to sign off and get myself a good night's rest. This has been an excellent stream. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining me. If you caught it in between, don't forget, this is going to be archived. The first hour, I'm going to be going over all of the perfume materials that are used in a rose composition. Second hour, the rose perfumes. And then the remaining 30 minutes of me just rambling on. So until next time, everyone, I hope everyone stays in good health and remains happy and safe. And I will see you all next time. Be well.